borrow Jeep again. I said, it's over here. I said, did you go and have a blood test done? Well, I figured this guy and put this thing on it and says, all the bears going in. I said, well, all bears just don't go. They either out or they're not. This one here, I said, you need to go in here. I said, go to somebody. He said, well, it says the battery's good. I said, the battery has to be unhooked.
Tommy got cut from basketball.
Yeah, he said, at least 3 kids.
Top 7 or 8. Just be sitting on the bench. He coached the summer team.
I think you've done an excellent job. I do too. I do too.
Bench the third team. I said he started every 12. I go, see the freshman. I'm not asking for all my parents. I just
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the January meeting of the Lafayette City Council. Please rise and join us in our pledge of the nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Clinker,
here.
Nargi. Here. Snyder,
Present.
Reynolds,
President.
Weiss. Present. Allersmeyer.
Here.
Williamson. Here. Downing.
Here.
Brown.
Yes, ma'am.
4 and present.
Okay, the first order of business today is no, not the roll call. Actually, we have to elect officers.
Yes.
And we open the floor for nomination for council president.
I nominate Lauren Alsmeyer for president.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations?
Move nominations be closed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the nominations be closed. I guess I would suggest that we vote yea or nay to appoint Lauren president by acclamation.
Aye.
There's no resistance to your
No,
move.
that's right. Get up there now.
Trajan.
Okay.
Don't forget your name.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Ma'am.
You dropped your name.
Not your name.
I'm gonna need you.
These are Perry's too.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown, and thank you for your excellent year of leadership. And for preheating my chair.
Editorial.
That's no extra charge.
All right, thank you so much. The floor is now open for nominations of President Pro Tem for the 2023 council year.
Madam President, I'd like to nominate Steve Snyder for Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for Steve Snyder as President Pro Tem. Any other nominations? Mr.
Move
Clinker
nominations
moved.
be closed.
Second.
Second.
Second?
Thank you. All those in favor of Steve Snyder as President Pro Tem for the 2023 council year signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you.
All righty, moving on to the approval of minutes. Mr. Downing?
I move to approve the minutes from December meeting.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Clinker?
Second.
All those, or actually, are there any comments from council, questions about the minutes from the December 5th meeting? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes as communicated signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Presentation and disposal of claims.
There are none.
Presentation of petitions and communications.
There are none.
Thank you. Reports of city offices on file in the clerk's office.
Fleet maintenance, monthly November. Waterworks Department, monthly November. And Renew Department, monthly November.
Thank you. And as a reminder to the public, those are available for you to view during business hours, and they're also available on the city's website, which is www.lafayette.in.gov. Moving on to ordinances for second reading, we start with ordinance 2022-45.
An ordinance to establish an opioid settlement unrestricted fund, number 2256.
Mrs. Nargi?
I move that we hear ordinance 2022-45.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Chosnick. I think you're, Ms. Chosnick, I apologize.
Oh, no problem. So we are here on second reading. This ordinance and the one following it are to establish the funds necessary to collect and track our funds from the opioid settlement. There is both a restricted and unrestricted fund. The first ordinance in front of you is to adopt the unrestricted fund.
Comments or questions from the council? Comments or questions from the public on ordinance 2022-45? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote?
Blinker?
Aye.
Nargi?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
Reynolds?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Weiss?
Aye.
Williamson?
Aye.
Downing?
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 2022-46.
Ordinance to establish an opioid settlement restricted fund, number 2257.
Mr. Reynolds?
Move to hear ordinance 2022-46.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Chosnick?
Yes, this is the ordinance to establish the restricted opioid fund.
Any further comments or questions from council? Members of the public on ordinance 2022-46? Thank you. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote?
Blinker?
Aye.
Nargi? Aye. Snyder?
Aye.
Reynolds?
Aye.
Weiss?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Williamson?
Aye.
Downing?
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you. Next up, ordinance 2022-47. Mrs. Weiss?
I move for approval of ordinance 2022-47 on final reading.
Thank you. Mr. Downing?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Chosnick, would you please enlighten us about ordinance 2022-47?
You want me to read it?
Oh, you did. I
No, that's okay.
apologize.
No, that's okay.
I'm just moving right along.
You are. An ordinance amending ordinance 2022-37, an ordinance fixing the salaries of the sworn protective occupation and law enforcement poll members of the police and fire departments of the city of Lafayette, Indiana for the year 2023.
Thanks. We just did that one backwards.
Okay, we got it. Very good. If you recall, during our budget season this last year for 2023, we did eliminate the positions of second-class patrol officer and firefighter 1 and increase the starting salary recruit officers for both recruitment and retention purposes. However, what we did not take into account was that the newest recruit class for the fire department was scheduled to move from recruit to firefighter 1 in December of last year. So what this ordinance does is adds the category of firefighter 1 back into the salary ordinance just for 2023 to allow that recruit class to complete their training and their firefighter 1. So their 1-year anniversary, which will occur around June of this year, they will then move into the journeyman status.
Great, thank you. Comments or questions from the council? Comments or questions from members of the audience for ordinance 2022-47? Seeing none, would the clerk please conduct a roll call vote?
Blinker?
Aye.
Nargi?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
Reynolds?
Aye.
Weiss?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Williamson?
Aye.
Downing?
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 2022-48. Mr. Klinker?
I move we hear ordinance 2022-48 on second reading.
Mrs. Nargi?
Second?
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Collier, welcome.
Good evening, John Collier from the
Oh, I'm
Economic.
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh,
I'm starting a new
sorry.
trend.
I'll let Cindy-
Please read that into the record, Madam Clerk.
An amendment to ordinance 2010-11 establishing local parent North Historic District in the city of Lafayette, Indiana.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, what she said.
Just kick me under the table this time. No, we got to hear all about it.
Okay, so this is an ordinance to establish a local Perrin North Historic District. This is basically adding 514 Perrin Avenue as included in this new district name that also has 508 and 518 Perrin, which had been previously established as individual local historic districts. But now that they're all contiguous, they're going to be one new local historic district called Perrin North. The Historic Preservation Commission reviewed and recommended approval for this designation. This is a gable front style home that was built in about the 1870s to 1880s, and our Historic Preservation Officer believes that the home is definitely worthy of being designated. So we would appreciate your support for this ordinance.
Comments or questions over this ordinance from council? Members of the audience? Seeing none, would the clerk please conduct a roll call vote?
Clinker.
Aye.
Nargi.
Aye.
Snyder.
Aye.
Reynolds.
Aye.
Weiss. Aye. Brown. Williamson.
Aye.
Downing.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Madam Clerk, would you please read ordinance 2022-49?
An amendment to ordinance 2010-11, inclusion of certain property in the local parent case and street historic district in the city of Lafayette, Indiana.
Mr. Snyder?
I move that we hear ordinance 2022-49.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Collier, back to you.
Okay, great. So this is for the inclusion of this property at 219 Tinkler into the existing Perrin, Cason Street local historic district. This is an Italianate-style home built in the 1870s to 1880s, and it's listed as contributing in the original report. And again, the Historic Preservation Commission recommends approval, and we appreciate your support for this ordinance as well.
Thank you. Comments or questions from council? Members of the audience? Seeing none, would the clerk please conduct a roll call vote on 2022-49?
Clinker.
Aye.
Nargi. Aye. Snyder.
Aye.
Reynolds.
Aye.
Weiss.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Williamson.
Aye.
Downing.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you. Last ordinance for second reading, ordinance 2022-51.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Chapter 8.08, or it's 8.06, trees and shrubs.
Thank you. Mrs. Weiss, sorry.
I move for passage of 2022, ordinance 2022-51 on second and final reading.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Second.
We've had some changes with this, so Ms. Chosnick, would you please tell us about that?
We will. I will just first remind on some of the changes that the first reading did that are not being impacted. This was an overhaul of the entire tree and shrub ordinance. This was a result of working with the Tree Advisory Committee, our city forester, Tim Detzner. The ordinance was in need of an overhaul. It hadn't been looked at in quite some time. Some of the main items that are addressed in the amended ordinance, we did add sections to address the intent and purpose authority of our tree and shrub ordinance. We addressed issues such as tree spacing to avoid infrastructure conflicts. It also modernizes some enforcement provisions for things such as dead trees, on property, nuisance things like that. After we adopted this on first reading, we did receive some additional feedback from Tree Lafayette. So after working with Tree Lafayette, I am proposing several amendments today to the ordinance. First of all, the First Amendment will remove language regarding tree root health. This just moves it from one section to another that is more appropriately placed. It does not make any changes to the requirements for the tree root health. There is a requirement that has been added to the new development section. It already requires that a tree planting plan must be submitted. Now, the amendment will also include that the plan must address which trees they are going to attempt to save, and then what preservation methods that are going to be taken to ensure that those trees are in fact saved and to prevent any damage to any surrounding trees that could be impacted by the development. We have added a subsection to the prohibited actions that prohibits intentional damage to trees by vandalism, mowing, weed whacking, chemical, or cutting. Then we shortened the time frame for the nuisance violations for when there is, for example, a dead tree on private property that we need to abate. The original ordinance did have a 30-day time frame in there, which after some internal discussions we thought might be too long, so that is being shortened to 14 days. And then the final amendment that I am proposing today makes adjustments to the section addressing the minimum height of limbs. This section has been amended to allow Tree Lafayette, who does a great job of helping us maintain our street trees, to allow them to go in and continue with their current practice of dealing with limbs that are in violation of the minimum height that are both originating from the street tree side of it, and then also trees that originate on private property, but the limbs overhang the right-of-way in violation of the minimum heights. So those are the amendments that we are requesting be incorporated. Happy to answer any questions.
Did you want this amended in its entirety with the new?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is what I'll ask for is a motion to accept the amendments that I just discussed, and then once those have been approved, we'll go and adopt the amended ordinance in its final version.
Okay, Well, the amended ordinance is amending 2022-49. I think we want to amend,
It's 51.
It's 51. That was a mistake on my part.
okay. All right, so we'll change that. So what motion do you need?
Well, are there any questions before we take a motion?
I do have a question about the shortening of time, Ms. Chosnick. Can you give us a little more background on that? Because some of our tree guys I've called and they can't get to things within a couple of weeks. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So this was to bring it into a line with what a lot of our other code enforcement provisions are. You know, typically in code enforcement, we will give anyone from like 7 to 14 days to correct violations. The concern was 30 days was a pretty long time period in order to correct a violation. Of course, we're always, reasonable. If someone calls and says, I've hired a tree contractor, they're going to be here on this date, then we will, of course, accommodate
Thank you.
that.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments about these amendments? Okay, so now we will entertain a motion to accept the ordinances, or amendments as she described them.
So moved.
Mrs. Williamson.
Second.
Okay, now we will take a roll call vote on the amendments that she just described. Madam Clerk, would you please conduct that vote?
Clinker.
Aye.
Nargi. Aye. Snyder.
Aye.
Reynolds.
Aye.
Weiss.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Williamson.
Aye.
Downing.
Aye.
Amendment passes 8-0.
Thanks. And now we will take a motion to get the full amended ordinance on the floor.
Very good.
Mr. Downing.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Clinker, thank you.
Second.
Any questions or comments from council or the public on this ordinance? Okay, seeing none. Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call on the amended 2022-51 ordinance?
Clinker.
Aye.
Nargi. Aye. Snyder.
Aye.
Reynolds.
Aye.
Weiss.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Williamson.
Aye.
Downing.
Aye.
Amended ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you, and thank you for your work on that, Ms. Chesniak. Now we are on to ordinances for first reading. First up is ordinance 2023-01.
An ordinance to amend ordinance 2022-36, an ordinance fixing the salaries of appointed officers and employees of the city of Lafayette, Indiana for the year 2023, excluding the sworn protective occupation and law enforcement members of the police and fire departments.
Thank you, Mrs. Nargi.
I move we hear ordinance 2023-01.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, before you have ordinance 2023-1, it does two specific things. The first, which is probably, or one of them that's probably the simplest, is we're requesting a change of title from Community Outreach Marketing Manager position within the police department to the Community Engagement Manager. As you know, in the budget, there is a position that the police department will have some working with them full-time on helping get information out about the police department, engage the community when it comes to statistics and data on a regular basis, and that will be a civilian position which this council approved during the budget process. The other one, now that we have worked through the opioid settlements, you have created the restricted and the non-restricted funds. That gives us the ability now to hire a position that we've talked about for quite some time within the police department. It's currently titled a social worker. You may see a change of title on that come back as we move through this process, as we see exactly how that works. I'm totally thrilled with that name, but we want to keep this moving. So for that reasons, we're going to keep it titled that tonight. This is a position that we believe is very important for the police department. Chief Galloway will come up to give more details, but as you know, we deal with people from all different backgrounds, circumstances, people suffering from mental illness, homelessness, and other types of issues that way. Adam Murphy, who's on our staff for years, has worked on those issues, as you all know, but we've never had a direct position inside the police department. So we feel that, and it qualifies after Jackie's review, that this is a good use of those opioid settlement funds to fund this position, to have a full-time person out there working with our officers as they deal with individuals who find themselves in some very challenging and difficult circumstances. I know Chief Galloway would like to expand this program to more than one person as time moves on, and so you may see us come back to you later looking at an additional appropriation. He has worked very hard to put the parameters of the program together, met with many individuals in the community, and I have great faith in his ability and the leadership of the police department to implement this which I think will be a very positive way for our community and most importantly, a very positive impact for those individuals that deal with and have the benefit of having this person to work with them and help acquire those services and get them to the proper places that we need to truly get them help. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Galloway to speak a little bit more about this ordinance.
Good evening, I'm Scott Galloway, I'm the police chief. So as we develop this program, and this is in response to the community needs, and when we have police involvement in addiction services and wellness, what we are preparing, I think, is what is transformative delivery of these important services. So for the last year or so, like the mayor mentioned, I've done a lot of hard work, I think, in trying to not only develop this, but see where it's gonna work for our community, because every community is different, every community has different resources available. So just as a short list, I've done field interviews with the West Lafayette social worker, which was relatively easy. I traveled to Bloomington and did a 360-degree analysis of their program, their rollout, what they had was successful, what lessons they learned. They have a pretty robust program where they do a lot of work with their community. It's been very effective. I reviewed multiple job descriptions and policies and worked on developing our own with HR and our legal department. So like I mentioned, every city has different resources and available needs. So we're gonna have to develop and make this program and our unit that we hopefully will eventually get a unit involved in this to deal with the problems that our community faces. We know what those are. We do research, we get data. That's also important for this program. And what our ultimate hope is that this position will help the recidivism rate of officer calls for issues involving addiction and mental health calls, which the public is desperately calling for us to have that as part of our program. And I'm happy to answer any questions or any of the research I've done.
Thank you. Comments or questions from council?
Steve?
Yes, sir.
What's your timeline for filling this position?
As soon as we get the money available, we're putting the final touches on our job description. We'll put our policy out and we'll start hiring immediately. I failed to mention, have put together an advisory committee with Mental Health America, Valley Oaks, the YWCA, NAMI, all those entities to help select the person. So we'll do that. That's who's going to do the interview process to help us select and also to help develop our policies and our procedures.
Any other comments or questions from council?
I think it's really good that you're including those agencies, because they know, a lot about this and how to solve it, and can really help us.
Absolutely, and
So thank you for putting that group together.
Thanks for recognizing that, because that was important as we put that
Yes.
advisory committee together at the beginning, because they would know
Absolutely.
and have different, they're the stakeholders, they know who they're seeing, and it's important to have them on board.
Is there representatives from the homeless community as well?
Yes, ma'am. So Adam Murphy, who the mayor mentioned, was
Oh.
also involved in those interviews. And Nora Ashcraft, who does our YWCA domestic violence. So I didn't want to make it too big, because nobody can make decisions at that point, but I think we have a good selection of people helping determine who's going to be the right person for this job and what the job looks like.
Yeah.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members of the public? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your time.
Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote on ordinance 2023-01?
Clinker?
Aye.
Nargi?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
Reynolds?
Aye.
Weiss?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Williamson?
Aye.
Downing?
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you. Next ordinance for first reading is 2023-02.
An ordinance for additional appropriation for the opioid settlement unrestricted fund number 2256 and opioid settlement restricted fund number 2257.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Move to hear ordinance 2023-02.
Thank you, Mrs. Heshman Weiss.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Ms. Chesnick?
Yes, of course, if we create a new position, we have to be able to fund it. So this ordinance is an appropriation from our newly received first installment of our opioid fund settlements. This is appropriating money from both the restricted and the restricted fund. I think it's approximately about 27% from the unrestricted portion and about 73% from the restricted portion, which we tried to kind of keep in line with what we anticipated this position is going to do, and specifically related to drug, substance use disorder, and things like that. So this is to appropriate that money.
Great, thank you. Comments or questions from council? Members of the audience? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you conduct a roll call vote?
Blinker.
Aye.
Nargi. Aye. Snyder.
Aye.
Reynolds.
Aye.
Weiss.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Williamson.
Aye.
Downing.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 8-0.
Thank you. We'll entertain a motion for a public hearing on this ordinance at the next council meeting for February 6th, 6:01 PM. Mr. Brown?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Williamson.
Second.
All those in favor of holding that public meeting at that time signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. That ends our ordinance session of the program this evening. Resolutions are, the first is Resolution 2023-01.
A resolution approving the detail of the 2023 Water and Renew wastewater department budgets.
Mr. Downing.
I move to hear Resolution 2023-01.
Thank you, Mr. Klinker.
Second.
Good evening, Mr. Deal.
Good evening, Jeremy Deal, City Controller. You have before you a resolution to approve the detail of the budgets for 2023 to operate the waterworks and renew departments and the utility billing office. I will summarize the budgets of each for you, please, the council. The budgets before you have been formulated with consultation from the waterworks superintendent, renew superintendent, and the utility billing director and their staff, and subsequently reviewed by the Public Works Director and the mayor. The resulting budget is reasonable, fully funded, and adequate to serve the needs of the departments in the current year. The 2023 budget includes a 5% raise for all utility employees, which is commensurate with the increase provided to all civilians for the current year. We've also increased budgets for natural gas and electric utilities, as well as chemical supplies in response to inflationary pressures we've realized recently and which we expect to continue throughout this year. We expect slightly increased health insurance costs for the year as well. Revenues for both utilities are expected to increase only slightly. So to detail a bit, the water utility operating fund budget is $12,474,144. That is an overall increase of just over, or just shy of $926,000 compared to last year. That's an 8% increase. Salary and benefits costs, increased chemicals costs, and planned engineering services for the Waterworks Master Plan constitute the majority of this increase. The budget for the Department 44, which is the utility billing office portion funded by the water operating fund, is up as a result of shifted cost allocation. So the costs to run the utility billing office are now split 50-50 evenly between water and renew operating funds. In the previous year, they had been slightly skewed so that renew paid a little bit more. The annual transfer from the operating fund to water depreciating fund remains unchanged at $1.5 million for this year. This reasonable operating budget allows the water department to continue its excellent service. The bond and interest fund is based upon the amortization schedule of the 2018 water bond. So it's a reactive budget and will mirror the required payments and the service, the bond administration fee for that debt. The depreciation fund expenditure budget is conservatively established at $2 million. Planned 2023 projects include continued change-out of water meters, continued improvements to the chemical feed structure, roof repairs at a couple of facilities, painting of well towers, and other equipment upgrades. Moving on to the water main replacement fund. This budget is proposed at $800,000. That is far in excess of our annual mandated transfer to the main replacement fund, which is $244,834. But there's an uncommitted cash balance in that fund now, around $726,000. So that makes that budget easily funded. Moving on to Renew. The Renew operating budget, a bit larger at $44,455,193. That's an increase of just shy of $5.9 million, or 15%. Salary and benefits costs, increased cost of electricity and natural gas, much as with water, and a dramatic increase in chemical costs, which impacts this department a little bit more. Explain a lot of that change. And some of those increased costs, we hope, are temporary. We tend to plan for the worst, though, so the chemical budget alone for Renew was increased almost $1 million for the coming year. We hope we don't need to spend all that, but it's better to be safe than sorry. We have a planned transfer of $11 million from the operating fund to the Renew depreciating fund. Now, that's a significant change, but it doesn't stress fund resources at all. The bond and interest fund, of course, also, it's a reactionary fund based on the debt service that we're required to make each year. The Renew depreciation budget of $11 million is an increase over the '22 budget by $300,000. So this fund accumulates transfers from operating funds to maintain and refurbish infrastructure and provide resources for new improvements. Planned projects for the current year from Renew entail construction of a new solar array, Vinton Woods drainage project, a new lift station at Rainy Brook, continued development of the service area 11B to the south side of town, treatment plant upgrades and other improvements. So I will answer any questions that council may have regarding detail of the budgets, but I respectfully request that council make this a approval for 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Deal. Comments or questions from council?
I got a quick question, if you would, please. I assume the chemicals, that goes through the joint purchasing board as well with other municipalities or not?
They do they all?
It doesn't go through the joint purchasing board
Okay.
that we buy out all of that, but we do bid it with West Lafayette.
Got
just
it.
through an agreement
Yep.
with the Board of Works.
So it's like a bulk
not
bid.
the actual
Okay.
joint purchasing board.
The problem we've run into with some of our contracts with the providers of chemicals is that they tend to claim force majeure due to difficulty obtaining components. And so although we contract for a given price, we've seen increments throughout the contract period that we've had to deal with.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council? Comments or questions from members of the audience? Thank you, Mr. Deal.
Thank
Seeing
you.
none, would the clerk please conduct a roll call vote on Resolution 2023-01?
Blinker.
Aye.
Nargi.
Aye.
Snyder.
Aye.
Reynolds. Weiss.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Williamson.
Aye.
Downing.
Aye.
Resolution passes 8-0.
Thank you. Our next resolution on the agenda is Resolution 2023-02.
A resolution approving the Greater Lafayette Climate Action Plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Nargi.
I move we hear Resolution 2023-02.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
I second that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to back up just for a moment on Steve's question, as you know, we do have the joint purchasing board that we do with Tippecanoe County, which has been very effective and works very, very well over the years and saved our taxpayers significant amounts of money. West Lafayette doesn't participate in that. They don't buy cut at the quantities and some of the things, but there are certain things like snow and then like chemicals that they'll enter into an agreement through the Board of Works on that particular purchase to jointly do it with us, but that's separate from the actual established joint purchasing board but with the city of Lafayette and Tippecanoe County. So any ways that we can work together, we certainly do. And Steve, I appreciate the clarification on that, so thank you. This has been a long road. I am thrilled to be here tonight. As you know, several years ago, we began working, well, it really started out with West Lafayette. They had passed a resolution looking at a climate action plan and some work that they had done in their community. We felt it was important to take on that task here in the city of Lafayette. But after thinking that through, I spoke with Mayor Dennis and spoke with the county commissioners about, could we do this as an entire county, as opposed to us having one, them having one, maybe at some point the county having one? Was there a way, even though they had completed theirs, that we could go back, work together, incorporate what they've done, expand on that, tie that into a way that it could be a county-wide ordinance? There is so much overlap in what we all do, from transportation to business and industry to supplies that we buy to public transportation, the work that's done in the Wabash River Enhancement Corporation, that I felt this was a good direction to take. Everybody agreed. And so, as typical here, everybody said, that sounds like a good idea. Let's put our heads together and see how we can do this as a community. So we started down that path. We learned pretty quickly that we were going to need some help managing something that large. So we worked with Greeley and Hansen to help us facilitate this process. They had information, knowledge, skills in this kind of on a local and national and international level, and resources that they could bring to the table that we felt would be beneficial. So over a period of years, we have been working through segments with steering committees and leadership committees, public meetings, surveys. We even did an event out at the fairground, an environmental event, everything working up to gathering information. I sat through some of the business roundtables with our business leaders and our industry leaders as we work through putting a comprehensive plan together that we feel will help ensure that we are good stewards of our natural resources, that we are protecting our environment and dealing with the effects of climate change going into the future, so that for our community, we're doing our part for generations to come. And I feel that's a responsibility that all of us have. And the wonderful thing was, it's been so well received. Like I said, everything from individuals to business and industry. We brought people together. We looked at reasonable expectations. We looked for ways to do this, and that we weren't going to try to do it all at once, but over time, and that we could continue to move our community forward. And I think that we've done an excellent job between the three units of government and then all of the citizen participation groups that we've had. And so I'm thrilled to bring this to you today. West Lafayette adopted it last week. I'm not sure if it's on the county's agenda when it's on their agenda, but West Lafayette adopted. Now, during this process with Greeley and Hansen, we did have a home run hitter, and she has done just an absolute marvelous job bringing us all together, keeping us all on task. She's got a great deal of passion and knowledge. I've told a couple times she's wise beyond her years. If I could have stole her from Greeley and Hansen, I would have, but we can't afford her. So we've just got to use her. But Mathalie has done just a tremendous job getting a big group with a lot of tugs coming from a lot of different directions together to reach the document. I think all of you have had a chance to see it. It's 243 pages long. A lot of that's data. We did lots of data gathering with the IU resilience cohort, and we had interns, and I'll just let her kind of go over some of that, and we won't take up too much of your time, but I think it's important to rehash that a little bit here at a public meeting to let you know how we got to this point. So she recently got married, so I know Doss is not it's the right last name.
Doss Lappin, I'm just adding.
Doss Lappin, okay. So
My name isn't long enough, so.
This is Mathalie, and of course you all know Margie Deverall, who was our main representative from the city of Lafayette through all of this, and we certainly want to thank her for all her hard work too. So you're up.
Thanks, Mayor. That was very kind. I do want to highlight Margie, like the mayor said, and also Brad Talley is on our advisory committee. But I think the mayor did a really good job of summarizing all the legwork we did to get here. So I won't repeat any of that, but I do want to talk a little bit about the plan, just to summarize what some highlights are in that document that Cindy's got. 4 major focus areas, starting with energy in our built environment. Our built environment is residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. This is our biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in our area. So as no surprise, that's our main focus. That's where we need to do all of our work to become a climate-ready, a resilient community. Group 2 is transportation. This is our second highest emitter. We've worked with City Bus, other groups here in town to really realize some of those benefits we can see by collaborating with different agencies around our community. Number 3 is our agriculture and forestry focus area. This is one that actually has a negative emission, which means that this is a group that we need to continue to maintain and preserve, plant more trees, work with groups like Tree Lafayette and others to really look at those tree planting plans and make sure this remains a carbon sink for our community so that number stays in the negative and takes up all of those emissions that we're emitting. And then number 4, our last focus area is water, wastewater, and solid waste. So again, working with Renew, working with Dave Henderson on the West Lafayette side to really think about what are some opportunities there to reduce our emissions with a higher demand in energy, higher costs of energy. There's some really out-of-box solutions we can think about when it comes to our water, wastewater, and solid waste. So those are 4 main focus areas. Again, I have a fresh copy with Cindy here, fresh off the printer. It's still warm. So it's for everyone's perusal. There's a digital copy on our website now. It's greaterlafayetteclimate.com, greaterlafayetteind.com/climate. So it's out there for the public to look at. I know we've talked to council members, both for West Lafayette, and we've talked to our county commissioners about this a little bit before, but I'll take any questions. I do want to mention kind of a, I guess, fun fact to end with was Google just posted their year-end summary for 2022, and climate change was a term that was most searched in Greater Lafayette out of any other place in the country. So I thought that was interesting and something worth sharing with this group because obviously there's a clear passion and interest in our community to do something about climate change. So I think we've put all of that passion into this document, and the real work starts now.
Thank you very much.
How many times did you Google it?
A lot of that might have been us.
Helped to go up a couple times.
Right. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions from council?
I just would like to thank you. I went to your seminar, and that was very informative, and thank you for all your hard work. And Mayor, thank you for being very proactive on this. I think it's phenomenal what you've done, so thank you.
Thank you. Members of the audience have comments or questions about this plan? I'd like to let the members of the audience know that that plan's also on the city's website, so they can access it there as well. No other further comments from council? All right, Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote on Resolution 2023-02?
Clinker?
Aye.
Nargi? Aye. Snyder?
Aye.
Reynolds?
Aye.
Weiss?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Williamson?
Aye.
Downing?
Aye.
Resolution passes 8-0.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your work on that plan, and Mr. Mayor, thank you for coordinating all of that in the beginning, so appreciate your hard work as well. Moving on to reports of standing committees.
We have some council appointments that we need to be re-upped. We have Ben Murray for the city bus for a 4-year term, and James Foster and Frank Donaldson for 1-year terms in redevelopment.
I
Right.
move all those gentlemen be accepted.
Second. All those in favor of those gentlemen retaining those positions signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Reports of special committees. Reports by the mayor. All right, miscellaneous and new business. Reports from council people.
I'd like to make a comment. I wanted to thank Jackie for putting together what she did with Tree Lafayette, Tree Advisory, and she just did an outstanding job putting all those amendments together, and everybody was satisfied, which is unusual. And I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Put you up
much.
for sainthoods.
And I'd like to wish everybody a Happy New Year.
Amen.
We're now coming to the public comment portion of our evening. If you would like to speak to the council this evening, please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. State your name and address before speaking, and please remember to use courtesy, respect, and kindness when addressing the council.
Pearl speaking, 923 South 22nd Street, Lafayette, Indiana. I know you're probably going to get tired of this, but I've lived there 27 years, so I feel like I got a right to fight for it. We've got a child care center down on the corner of Lamb and 22nd. I don't want to knock any business, but this child care center has 5 to 7 employees. Okay, you got 5 to 7 parents coming down there dropping kids off. The woman right there on the corner of 27th and 22nd and Lamb has asked this big trucker, I'm beginning to, I used to love trucks, but I hate them now, because everybody thinks they can do what they want. She wants to block that corner on Lamb and 22nd with her big Dodge truck. Well, I hope one of these days he gets rammed. Like I said, I know you need child care, but do you need bullies that pulls their black truck in front of somebody's house that's lived there 23 years and is taking that path of damn parking? 22nd Street is it's very little parking to start with, and the mayor and the police department and everywhere else knows it. So somewhere along the line, when you you can have a child care center, please remember, you're gonna have parents, you're gonna have workers, and if they take all the public parking spots up, where in the hell are we gonna park? I know I got a 150-foot yard. I'll park there if I have to. But this poor lady's been there 23 years, is almost in tears the way they're treating her. And it's just, you know, as you get old, you ain't gonna treat me that way, I'll guarantee you. You might treat that old lady that way, but you ain't gonna treat me. And as long as I'm around, I'm gonna bring it up if she's getting treated wrong. And also, again, we had 2 car thefts in our area this past week. So in other words, around the new park area and 22nd and Lamb and Central, we're getting Chicago-style people in, which I don't know what your plan is, but I know that the people that loves that area, it's been there 20 years, ain't gonna give it up. Because I'm too lazy to move. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment this evening? Yes, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kirk Freeman. I live at 1200 Ridgeway Avenue, Lafayette, Indiana, the north end. I rise tonight to speak because I've been concerned. I've seen on social media and the media itself that Lafayette Police Department is hiring new officers. And because of the recent falderall that we had in the Lafayette Police Department hiring an extremist, which was later found out and then terminated, I call upon the City Council to act to ensure that this does not happen again. And I have 4 points that I wanted to raise. One, I wanted to call in so much that's permissible with state and federal laws to mandate a transparency in the background check of any new hires. Obviously, the last extremist that LPD hired was caught and found out by members of the public. In so much that does not conflict with state or federal law, I call upon a scheme that allows us to know who we're interviewing and what their past is. Second, I call upon a resolution from the City Council to call upon a grand jury to investigate the Lafayette Police Department by the prosecuting attorney of Tippecanoe County. Obviously, if you have one roach, there are others in the kitchen. I believe there should be an investigation from outside the city as to who constitutes the cadre of the Lafayette Police Department. Thirdly, and with the first day of the Indiana General Assembly, I call upon the City Council to pass a resolution in favor of the abolition of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is an affront to the Constitution, an affront to the 14th Amendment and the Reconstruction Acts that were used to fight Jim Crow in the South. Qualified immunity is a judicial creation of that horrific policy. I call for the City Council to pass a resolution condemning it and asking that it be abolished. Fourthly and lastly, I call upon the City Council to pass a resolution and to look into ways to pay city judgments, civil judgments against the Lafayette Police Department using not taxpayer dollars, but the retirement funds of the Lafayette Police Department. This spreads the pain out to the entire police department and gives the good apples the incentive to keep the bad apples in line or to blow the whistle on them. For these measures, I call upon your action and attention to this. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment this evening? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Yes, sir. I didn't get it. Yeah, Tom, I did it shortly after. I just messed the mayor.
Too fast.
Jeremy, Jeremy Craven, I'm sorry. Hey, Jeremy, can I see you for a second?